had a couple of things I wanted to talk about before I went into this. First is, how many people have heard of the Hive Life conference? Right? Well, anyway, the Hive Life conference is a conference that was started a few years ago, 3 years ago, and it's held in Seversville, Tennessee. And the first year they had 200 people. The second year they had 700 people. And this past year they had 2,000 people. Okay? And what makes it a little bit different than EAS or ABF is, first of all, it's in Tennessee, so it draws a lot of the southern beekeepers for Arkansas, Louisiana, you know, on and on. So it's people that you don't normally see at EAS. The other thing is the speakers are really people that have a presence on social media. In other words, they make YouTube videos, or they have podcasts and they get interviewed on podcasts. So people like, and you may not know these names, Cayman Reynolds, Ian Stepler, Bob Binney, ATN Tardif. These guys, I know of them because I've seen their videos. Oh, and Landy, we're going to get there. Relax. So, you know, I know of all of these people, but I've never seen them speak. The other thing that's kind of unique about it is, how many vendors do you think they had?
Oh my God.
50 at least.
A lot.
I've never seen this many vendors, and I've never seen a honey show this big. The honey show was just huge and amazing. So anyway, that was that. But our own Landy Simone also spoke at this conference, even though she doesn't have, other than a Facebook page, a social media presence.
I actually do.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that I did, but people have taken movies of me giving talks.
And here's what,
venues.
And this is exactly where I'm going. Thank you. You walked right into it. So we get down there, right? And everybody that sees Landy speak, they are just gaga over her. And who wouldn't be? We all know, right? So they're coming up to her and they're saying, "Oh, we just loved your presentation. Oh, that was terrific." People come up and say, "Can I take a picture with you, Landy?" Right? So anyway, the last day, we're sitting down at lunch, and I'm having lunch with Landy, and this couple comes over. They're called the Hales, and they're from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And they said, they were going on and on about how great her lecture was, and they had something for her. Well, Landy, they gave her a gift, and Landy gave half of it to me. So I brought it back for Landy because it's really hers. What this is, and I'm going to pass it around, is this is a wine bottle of honey. It's labeled like honey, and it's a takeoff on a wine bottle, right? And so he gave you 2 of these. One of them was more like a Jack Daniels or something.
Yeah, I just emptied it today and washed it out. But,
so let me just kind of read you.
Hive Select.
So you get it, right? It says, over 50,000 young ladies worked tirelessly for months to capture the delicious floral flavors from countless wildflower blossoms found in the hot and humid floodplains of south central Louisiana. These efforts result in the unique test you will find only in Mêlée Dorée Private Reserve. So anyway, back to you.
You know what? I, in turn, am going to turn around and give that to our birthday girl.
All right. Well done.
Has worked tirelessly to make this year's honey show one of the best ever.
Well played.
Wow, that was a circle.
Perfect. So anyway, no, really, they just went gaga, and she was so embarrassed walking around. I'm going, Landy, you don't know. Everybody knows you. You're famous.
It's just like really weird, you know, because I don't feel famous.
Yeah.
You are so famous.
Oh God.
I was watching one of the videos, YouTube videos, David Burns, and he's talking about women and beekeeping, and who shows up in the video?
Dave was at Hive Alive. Yeah.
And he was talking about Landy.
Okay. So before I get into my talk, what do I want to say? I forgot now. I wanted to say, I often have people come up to me and they'll say, what is the right way to do this? Right? You get that? What is the right way to do this? And I always tell them the right way is whatever works for you. And what I mean by that, not is just do whatever the heck you want, but don't be afraid to try different things and ask different people what they do, because there's 1,000 different ways to keep bees, right? So get out there and experiment. So with that in mind, I look out at this audience, there's a ton of experience out here, and not just me. So I'd like this to be very interactive. It's a pretty basic presentation on seasonal management, the 4 seasons. So if you have something that you'd like to share or something that you don't agree on in here, and a couple for you, feel free to just jump right in. And I guess the last thing I want to say is I saw a webinar with Marla Spivak this week. Did anybody see it? Okay, it was great. So Marla, for those of you who don't know, she developed the Minnesota hygienic strain of bees. Well, she's still working on trying to find bees that are tolerant to mites. And what she did is she got all the resistant bees that she could find, the pole line bees, she got some of the bees from the Arnott Forest, she got some Russians, she got some Saskatraz, and she has an isolated apiary, so she has really nobody around her. And so what she's trying to do is develop, a better, more resistant bee. And what she's doing is what I want to share with you, because a lot of times, we got this fight between treatment-free and treatment beekeepers and back and forth, and, we shouldn't be fighting with each other. So I'll tell you what, this is what she suggested and she's doing, and I've heard this also from Megan Milbrath, okay? So it comes down to you have to monitor your mites all the time. You got to know what it is, okay? Right? So we all know that. But what she says is my hives that have low mite counts, those colonies, I don't treat them. The other ones that have high counts, I treat all of them. And I breed from the ones that have the low mite counts, that without any assistance can keep the mite level low. And it makes sense, right? Because what do the thresholds say? If you're below the threshold, you don't need to treat, right? And she's raising queens, and she's finding, doing a lot of science on it, she's finding that she's getting better and better and better. So just something to think about, right?
Who's that? That's Megan or Marla?
Both. Marla Spivak is the one I saw this week, but I've seen Megan do this exact same one.
So then what about Dr. Katie Lee that came out of Marla's lab that said you have to treat everything in an apiary?
Oh, well, got to ask her.
But so she studied under Marla, so that's why.
I don't know. I just saw her this week, and that was what she said, and I thought it was very reasonable.
But it's great if you've got an isolated yard.
Again.
The problem is we don't have isolated yards.
I agree.
I can have an apiary and pick out, of like 30 hives and pick out 5 with low mite counts and breed from them. But then what happens when I get,
Yeah, I guess.
bombed and robbing lured in September and those colonies die?
I can't deny that we can't do that here, but just think if everybody did it. And that's asking a lot, right? Not everybody is going to do it.
There are lots of feral hives in the woods.
That too.
We can't control that.
Well, the feral hives are living without any intervention, right?
And a lot of those feral colonies collapse and fall and get robbed out by ours, and then ours die if they're not monitored and treated.
Okay.
It's just...
Your point is well taken.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people don't treat either.
Yes.
There are people that don't treat and then you get drift.
Yes. Yes. So I didn't want to get into that argument, but I just wanted to share what Marla said.
So
John.
I'll say from a practical standpoint for beekeepers that aren't breeding and raising queens, I think the best suggestion is to check each hive. Monitor mites frequently, that's for sure.
Yes.
And just because you have a low mite count in one, don't assume that it's going to stay low, because to Landy's point and others, that oftentimes it gets up pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're breeding queens or trying to raise queens, you need to treat every hive in the apiary. That's been my experience
Okay.
here.
Fair enough. But again, the point goes back to you need to know what your mite load
So
is.
If you're looking to select queens to raise queens from, you
Yep.
have monitor, and then on that exception basis, don't treat that, but you gotta be very, very.
Very careful.
The risk is pretty high, you're gonna lose maybe good genetics because you're not treating.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't want to go there, but I just wanted to share what I heard from Marla.
I guess I wanted to say something because I've seen just
Yeah.
this past year, people that have tried to do the right thing with IPM,
Mm-hmm.
low mite cons, so they didn't treat, and all of a sudden, the mites got out of control,
Mm-hmm.
and now they've lost their colony, and it's pretty sad.
And I guess my 2 cents on the whole mite thing would be, I think where I've come out at the end of the day is, you have to keep your mite counts low, because once they get high, it's very hard to bring them back down, okay? So that's why monitoring is so important. You need to know what they are, and you need to keep them low. So even if they're low, you may think about treating them right just to keep them down there. Because once they get out of control and you got 10 mites per 100 bees, it's hard no matter what you put on them, whether you use Apivar or whether you use oxalic acid or Formic Pro. It's hard to knock them down when they're up at that high
You
level.
sound mighty sure about that. Sorry.
I have a question. The presentation that Marla did, is that like a series through Project Eupicent, or is it?
No, this was, it was through one of the bee clubs.
Okay.
I'll send you where it was, because maybe we can get the recording
That'd be nice.
of it.
So I am giving a mite management presentation to the
Okay.
Northeast Beekeepers this Friday evening
Huh?
at Ramco College at 7:30. So
Is
I'll
that a
be,
shameless plug?
well,
If you don't get there early, get a seat.
It's a shameless public service announcement.
yeah,
It's not
I do
getting any
this to
money
help
for
other
it.
beekeepers
Right.
out and try to prevent all these colony collapses
Yeah.
that we see. And I don't have all the answers, but I've got some suggestions that help prevent colony losses. So anyway, 7:30 at Ramapo College, if you're interested.
John really does that, because you guys don't treat, it goes to his colony. Just like get his colonies down.
Yeah. You say, how do I know that? My other presentation I gave at EAS was on oxalic acid, and Jennifer Berry is the one who showed that oxalic acid, when you have brood, it will not knock your mite levels down, it will just keep them the same. So you can control.
She's speaking to us in April.
Is she? Okay, well, that's great. Then you'll love her talk on oxalic. All right, so we're going to go. Can we kill this light somehow? So we're going to talk about the 4 seasons. This was in the dearth after I took the honey off. It was about 100 degrees that day, so that was in the summer. And then this one, this is known as, Kevin named it the nuke condo. And what I do in my home yard is I put 4 double nukes together, and then I insulate all around them. I even insulate the front now, and I got rid of the top entrances, John. But this was a while back. So that's what that is.
What's that white stuff?
Yeah, I haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a few years back. This slide, I really like this slide because it took me probably 2 or maybe even 3 years to really understand the cycle that the bees go through over 4 seasons. And you say, well, how could you not get that? What happens in the beginner's courses, they just overload you with so much information, right? That you don't understand. This is what you really need to know, right? So they start in the winter, right? So that's when brood rearing starts. It peaks over here in the spring. And then what do the bees want to do in the spring? They want to swarm, okay? So they're all trying to build up fast enough, get enough stores so that half of them can go and raise a new queen. So that's 4. Then down here, brood rearing starts to decrease, okay? Ceases late in the fall, and then they cluster for the winter. So this is what they're doing, and I never understood that. It took me 3 years to understand what the bees were trying to do. And why is that important? Why? Because you want to work with the bees, right? Anybody ever try to raise queens in the fall? God, good luck, right? So So anyway, I really like this. And this is another one that just, even this we don't show in the beginner courses, right? What is beekeeping all about? If I had to put it in one slide, this is what beekeeping is all about, right? Trying to get your population peak at the peak of the nectar flow. The most bees at the most nectar flow. That's what you're trying, if you're trying to make honey. So this is a little plug for the calendar. I have, by the way, every calendar from every year since we started. It's a collection. So anyway, what's great about the calendar, it tells you what you should be doing every month, right? So it gives you a really, especially if you're new, it helps a lot. So I'm going to tell you that the honey bee year begins in the fall. And why is that? Okay? So why is it in the fall? So what are the things you have to do in the fall? You got to have enough healthy winter bees, right? Non-parasitized winter bees, a big enough cluster that they can stay warm. You have to have enough stores, and we're going to go through all of that. But your management depends on what are you trying to do. You know, a lot of us are just strictly honey production. Most of us go for some amount of colony increase because we lose hives over the winter, right? So you try to make up for losses that way without having to buy bees. And if you're pollinating, that's a whole different story. I think this was one that I don't, that a lot of people don't think about, reducing colony space during periods of dearth. You know, one of the conclusions that I've come to after a few years of beekeeping is that an important thing in beekeeping is making sure that the bees fit the space, right? You don't want 2 frames of bees in a 10-frame hive. You want them in a little nuke, right? So you want to try to keep your bees to the space that is comfortable for them if you want them to do their maximum, right? To do their maximum. Will they survive in the other way? Sure, they'll survive and they'll limp on. But if you want them to thrive, match the bees to the space. Swarming, feeding when needed. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Go buy some good young queens from John. And obviously, diseases and pests. Oh, I didn't say that too. I have a new pest for us.
Oh,
Shh. Don't say it. We're going to do it at the end. But there's a new pest, and it's not Tropolalaps either. Okay?
it's not even a bug.
That's right, it's not. Okay, so beekeeping begins in the fall. I talked about that. Adequate honey stores, large population of winter bees. That's why it's so important to have your mites under control before September. Okay? If you're going to wait until they get brood, say you're just going to wait till they get broodless. It's too late. Your bees have been parasitized. The viruses are there, right? And what happens is, and I hear this all the time from people, I went out and looked at my hives on a nice warm day in December, and man, they were flying like crazy. I went back in January and a nice warm day, and man, they were flying like crazy. I went back 2 weeks later in February, and the hive was dead. Well, why? You didn't have enough healthy winter bees to survive. So what happens, one of two things. One is the summer bees are all dying. You don't have enough winter bees to last to the spring. The cluster shrinks, and they either can't keep warm or they can't move to where the food is, where the stores are, right? So that's important. And we know that winter bees are different, right, than summer bees. Everybody understand that? They got more fat bodies, vitellogenin. All right, in the fall, you got to make sure they have enough food. Oh, I have to digress for a minute. You see this little beauty here? That queen was 4.5 years old. And I was so smitten with her that they were trying to supersede her, and I wouldn't let them. I took her out, I put her in a nuke box, and I went in every week to make sure that they had queen cells, boop, they went out. And I kept her alive for a few more weeks. But that's why she's up there. All right, so in the...
How old is she?
She was over 4 years. Yeah, the only one I've ever had last that long. I have one now that's going into her 3rd year, but...
And still producing well?
Yeah, well, see, that's the thing, right? Because people will tell you you need nice young queens, and it's right. You know, young queens do better living through the winter than older queens do, and they're more productive and all of that stuff. But there's also a school of thought that says, why not breed for longevity, right?
I had a Minnesota hygienic bred by Marla Spivak.
Uh-huh.
That was the best queen I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Number 62, and she lived over 4 years also.
Yeah. So it's fun just playing with them anyway. Okay, so in the fall, you got to feed. You're feeding 2-to-1 syrup. Why? Because if you feed them 1-to-1, you feed them 1-to-1 spirit when you want them to start building up and stimulate them. You feed them 2-to-1 if you want them to store it. Clean off your mouse guards. We're going to talk more about mouse guards. This is a big one. I tell people this all the time, the people that I work with, and I never do it. I never do it till this year. This was the first year in 12 that I did it, right? I always try to limp along with these little weak colonies in the fall. And guess what? They all die, right? You have to bite the bullet. You really have to just bite the bullet and say, look, there's got to be enough winter bees. There's got to be enough food. And if there's not, guess what? The odds are they're not going to make it. So take your losses in the fall. Reversing the inner cover, that's a great debate. Does the notch go up or down in the winter or the summer? What notch? That's good. That's good, John. Bare fencing, requeen. Okay, wind breaks. Wind has been a real problem for me. I maintain bees for the club up at Valley Crest Farm, and they sit up on top of a little ridge. And I'm really having a hard time keeping them alive. And I think it's because of the wind, and I was going to do something about it this year, and I didn't. And I think I lost probably at least 3 out of 5 because I think it's just too windy up there. So that's one that we don't often emphasize. You know, we talk about insulating and we talk about other things, but it's important that they're protected from the wind.
Is that your picture of a bear? Did you really take that?
No, that's not mine.
Oh, thank goodness.
Thank God. Well, this is crazy too. I've never seen bears where I am. It's kind of rural, farmy, right? And I didn't think there was bears around. So I'm going around to my neighbors giving out honey like I always do around Christmas. And I stop in at this house and I give the guy some honey and he said, "Did you see that bear behind your house?" And I went, "What?" He said, "Oh yeah, it was right behind your house." And I went, "Oh God, I'm going to have to put up a bear fence now," right? Because they're everywhere. They're in every county in the state. And if you think...
I was jogging with one once.
Yeah.
I was jogging down my road.
Yeah.
Looked over and there was a bear right there in my neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
Who jogged next to me for a little while.
You know, the answer really is, if you think you don't have bears, think again, right? Because they're everywhere. Okay, so this is what the colony looks like. This is, again, we got a lot of experienced people here. So early in the fall, you got maybe 5 frames of bees, right? You got your honey and your pollen to the outside, and then they cluster in the winter, late fall. So that's pretty straightforward. Honey stores, properly positioned. We talked about that. This is another one, and this is especially this tap on the hive. I'm not sure I believe that. I put it up there, but that's not something I do. What I do is I heft them. I never open my hives in the winter. I'll tell you that right now. I just don't. Okay, I lift them to see how heavy they are, but I don't open them until we get around this time of year and maybe even later. Okay, but it's a personal preference, right? People do what they want to do. But I like to just heft them up and see, are they heavy? If they're heavy, okay, good. All right, winter, you've got to clean up your dead out. That's the worst thing. See, that's why it's so important to work really hard to keep your bees alive, because cleaning up dead outs is the worst. How many, right? Have you ever cleaned up, half of your hives die and you have to clean up all of those frames and bees? Oh, it's a terrible job. Plus, that feeling of losing bees never goes away. That first year you lost your hives and you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach. I still get that when my hives die, any of my hives die. So it never...
Then the pin in your wallet, because you have to go...
Yeah, it never goes away, right? So right now we have brood rearing resuming as the day length increases. So a couple things I wanted to say about stores, and John, you can back me up since you're here. I had some brood minders on my hives, and I had some scales on my hives. This was a few years back, and I was really surprised that over the winter they only ate 1.5 to 2 pounds a week, all winter long, And then all of a sudden, when they started brood rearing, which, how did I know when they started brood rearing? The temperature in the hive went from 75, 80 to 94 and just stayed there. And that, for me, that 1 year was the first week in March, okay? And once that happened, all of a sudden now they're going through 6 or 7 or whatever, John.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I've got a couple of pictures of the brood minders, just a flat line from November through about now. You know, you see people posting, oh, my bees are flying, they're using up all their food. That's so untrue. First of all, the bees, it's good that they're out taking some defecation flights, maybe it's the young bees orientation, but they don't take that much energy flying.
Right.
And they're only out for a short period of time, they're not consuming really much honey at all. And once they start brood rearing, they need that honey for 2 reasons. To keep the brood nest warm, the carbohydrates to keep the brood nest warm, and they're feeding some of that honey to the brood. So it goes down. And just the brood rearing resumes now. I've been in the hives a couple times.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And I pulled a couple frames the other day, and there's the brood rearing's definitely ramping up.
Yeah, yep.
How many frames of brood do you have now?
Typically 1 frame in each hive. So, you know, I see, I've got apple bar in a hive, so they're just really knocking down the mics then too.
Yeah.
So I'm in the hives moving those apple bars shifting around.
So, you know,
Are they up onto the second bee bar already?
Yeah, why do you ask that question? So, I know that a lot, the conventional wisdom is if they're in the top, they're running out of food. I don't see that in my hives, because, and I'm looking to make sure they have food, believe me.
Yep.
But why are they in the top? Because that's where it's warmest in a hive. It doesn't make sense that the cluster's down here if all the heat's up here, especially in an insulated hive.
Yep.
Now, there are some clusters that are down lower, that's for sure, but 9 out of 10 are in the top, and that's where the honey is anyway.
So again, if you think about they're only using 1.5, 2 pounds a week through the winter, you know, why are people opening up their hives in December and January to see if they have enough food? Oh, it's been warm. It's been a warm fall. You open up my hive to see if they need any food. Well, first of all, you can do that by lifting. And second of all, they're not eating that much when they're in cluster. That's the whole idea. What's the optimum temperature for bees over the winter?
It's 45 degrees.
Around 40-ish, right? 40 to 45. And that's what a lot of the commercial beekeepers are keeping them indoors now. This guy, Ian Stepler from Canada, he just stores all his inside at 40 degrees with red lights. Okay, I digress. Feeding bees in the winter, again, you can feed them dry sugar, you can make fondant if you want to, but you don't want to feed them liquid. Okay, why? Because it's going to give them dysentery. And if you've ever had dysentery in one of your hives, it's pretty ugly. And then you have to clean it all up and all of that too. So don't feed them syrup. And people they feed syrup too late, in my opinion, too late in the fall where they don't have enough time to ripen it. Okay? So if you have a question in the fall whether it should be solid feed or you're going to give them 2 to 1, I would put the solid feed on top as an insurance policy. Okay? Then you don't have to go in. So, my 2 cents. Late winter, your first inspection a year. Okay, so look at these two. Look at this hive, this colony, and then look at this colony. Okay, which one really looks like it made it through the winter in good shape? Right? This one, of course. Look at the size of that cluster. This one, is it alive? Yes. Did they make it? Yes. Will they survive? Probably. But you know what? This is what you're looking for. This is my top bar hive during that same nasty storm, and you probably can't see it too well, but there's bees, the cluster is up to here. And that's what's nice about having the windows. You can just take them off and see what's what. Okay? Whoops. late winter, all right? In the winter, they might be between the boxes, but to John's point, a lot of them are up where the warm air is. So they're gonna be up at the top. And that's why people say pop the top. If they're up there, that means they need food. Don't necessarily agree with that. All right, early spring. What do I mean by early spring? Oh, I got it. I'm proud of this one too. See this? What time of year do you think this was?
April 15th.
It was about the 10th of April.
That's close.
Yep. And look at that. Now, I only had them come through like that once. But this is, when Michael Palmer talks about his nukes, this is what they look like coming out of winter. And man, that's what you want. Those things just explode in the spring, okay? So, you don't want to go in too early. Wait till it's, especially the wind. The wind is probably your worst enemy. It was beautiful a couple of days ago. It was 57 degrees, but the wind was blowing, and guess what? It was cold, and it was not a good day to go into your hives. You want it to be 60-ish, even if it's 55, but you don't want any wind. That wind is a killer.
We'll have that weather in a couple days.
Yeah, hopefully we will.
Are we getting snow? Belcher's is supposed to snow next week.
Oh gosh.
What is the snow you guys speak of? Oh my god.
All right, we talked about checking your varroamite levels. If you're going to use something like Apivar, right, it takes, 8 weeks? So you got to put it on early, because then you need, a couple of weeks before you put honey supers on. So you got to start, again, planning ahead. If you're going to treat in the spring, you really have to start thinking about it in the winter, and you start it in the winter with most of the treatments, because a lot of them are temperature dependent, and you can't use them when it's too cold. Okay, so Formic Pro, you can't use Formic Pro now. It's not warm enough. Okay. Usually you have the opposite problem. You're going to split your colonies and equalize. This is something a lot of people don't do either. I just got into doing this more and more. Is not that I'm going to want to weaken my strong colonies, but you can equalize a little bit. You don't have to really, take so much away from your strong colonies that they're not going to be good honey producers. So think about that. You'd be surprised what a frame of brood will do, cap brood will do to give a hive a real boost.
Equivalent of about 3 frames of bees.
Yeah.
2 to 3 frames of bees. 1 frame cap brood.
Right?
Yeah.
Reversing brood boxes, we all know this. Some people do it, some people don't, okay? We also know that you don't want to split the cluster, so if it's like this, you don't want to do this to it, right? So you wouldn't reverse the boxes in this case until they were all up here.
So when would you do that?
Depends who you talk to.
Wait.
I would wait until it gets warmer, because again, think about it this way. So your bees are up here where it's nice and warm, right? Now you're going to take them down here, and if it's 25 degrees at night or lower, and the cluster is maybe not as big as you would have liked it, then you're going to have a problem. Landy?
I don't always reverse them all at the same time. The ones that are weaker, I leave. The strong ones I'll reverse. But I'll often do like 2 sessions of reversing in a yard.
Yeah.
I'll go through and do the really strong ones early, and then come back a little bit later when the weather's warm some to do the weaker ones.
It's a great point. We all are so anxious after the winter to get into our hives, right? But you have to show a little restraint. So good point, Landy. Thank you. Spring feeding. Why do we feed 1-to-1 or pollen supplement? I just watched another webinar with Jamie Ellis, and he was talking all about pollen subs. And that if you look at he had one of his students look at every study there was on pollen subs, every single one, and he found out that some show that they work and some show that they don't work. And where he came out at the end of the day, which he thought was, as long as there's natural pollen out, you're wasting your money putting pollen subs on them. But if there's no natural pollen subs will make a difference. So again, just one man's opinion. And after looking at the research.
Shelf life on pollen substitute?
Well, I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is. John, Landy?
used some this year that was like from last year, and it's questionable, but it seems like the bees are still consuming it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't let it go much. Well, I tried to keep it under cool conditions.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I think if
But
it,
it's protein, and it's gonna break down.
And
Yeah.
it smells better when it breaks down. I just threw out a bunch.
Mhm.
And my brother finally got to it. It was about 3 years old. And it
Yep.
smells so
Yeah, if it
bad.
smells bad, don't feed it to
Yeah.
them.
yeah,
Would it be better to put it in the refrigerator over the winter?
I would put it in the freezer myself,
Yeah.
and then I would have no problem using it the next year. But would I go much beyond that? Probably not. Probably not. But again, that's just my opinion, not fact.
You know, Bob, I mean, what Jamie Ellis is saying, like right now, the bees are bringing in skunk cabbage pollen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's white, yeah. And,
We're getting crocus.
it's, yeah, maybe a little bit of crocus. So there's not much variety in the pollen that's coming in. And, you know, vegetarians, when you're getting pollen, in order to get a complete protein profile, you need a variety of pollens. They're not all complete protein. None of
Yes.
them are complete proteins.
And the other thing that he stressed, so I agree with you, the other thing that he stressed was they need lipids too, the fats, okay? So it's, my 2 cents would be to stimulate brood rearing in the spring, I would use pollen substitutes. It's worth it for the cost, right? To get your bees brooding all. This is what, whereas Grant's not here tonight, but this is what Grant does. Grant splits his colony, all of his colonies early in the year, he splits them all, and then he feeds the hell out of them and builds them back up in time for the honey flow.
And then he combines them.
And that's what he does, okay? By the way, you know how I know that? Grant was my roommate in Malawi. Oh God. We would lay there at night and you can't even believe some of the conversations we were having. But yeah.
So the other point about pollen patterns
Yes.
this time of year, it certainly does stimulate brood production, depending on the colony too. Colonies had brought in a lot of pollen in the fall, some bring in more than others. They've
Yeah.
got a lot of reserves of pollen now, mostly in the vitellogen. But some colonies are deficient, so they can use a little bit. That'll help brood production. And even though there might be some pollen coming in from skunk cabbage or something else, the length of time that bees can fly is limited.
Yes.
And the number of days that bees can fly are limited this time of year. So that pollen patty really keeps them going whenever they can't go out and get it themselves.
That's a great point. It's a great, if you're looking to stimulate them and get them to brood up earlier.
Yeah, and for this area, that makes sense because our nectar flows are so early. You'd rather have the brooding up earlier
Yeah.
to take advantage of that nectar flow.
Yep.
Open feeding pollen substitute
Ah,
is something I really love because then the bees will go out and get it when they need it and want it. And we've had plenty of flying weather this winter. You know,
okay.
so I just put that feeder with powder in it and, you know.
Like I said, there's no right way or wrong way. That's Landy's way. That works for Landy. Give it a shot. I'd give it a shot. No, seriously. Okay, late spring to summer swarm season. So we saw from the first one, what does every hive want to do in the spring? It wants to build up fast enough, has enough bees and enough food that it can split into two and make a new colony. These are some, swarm cells. You don't have to be a John Gott to raise queens, Some of the, there's one of them there, right? Two of them. But, these things are gold. You've got queen cells like swarm cells, you don't get a better queen than that, right? So if you have them, this is great when you're making your splits. If you don't want them to have to raise a queen, you can save a few weeks by using these queen cells.
Not just using queen cells like you said. I mean, that's the way I started to learn to raise queens because I just kind of watched and understood what the bees were doing themselves and
Yep.
just helped them the next steps kind of thing. So.
And again, that's why we said try to work with the bees, right? Work with the bees. In the spring, the bees want to make queens because they want to swarm. Okay, so if you want to, you just have to make sure that if you're raising queens that you have enough drones to mate them.
More colonies, in other words, take a couple frames
Yeah.
and just watch what happens. It's amazing.
Yeah, yep, sure is. So bait hives, how many people put bait hives up? In my 3 bait hives, that's all I put up in my yard. I caught 5 swarms last year. 5. And actually, I had a friend up in Milford, and he was walking his dog in January, and he heard buzzing, and he looked up, and he saw bees coming out of a hole in the tree. And we actually wrote to the park commission and asked them, told them they had wild bees there and why that was so important, and asked if we could put a bait hive up there. And so we did. We put a bait hive up there about, I don't know, 30 yards away or something, and we caught one of those swarms. So it's a great way to do it. All you need is a frame of dark old comb, right? A little bit of lemongrass oil or Swarm Commander or whatever you want to use, and it should be about 40 liters, which is the size of 1 deep. So if you don't do this, you really should. And you know what? The other thing about bait hives is you don't have to risk, life and limb to put them 20 feet up. Kevin, my friend Kevin, who I didn't bring tonight because people start talking. Kevin has a bait hive that we made. We made him, and it's sitting on the ground in the flyway between his house and his garage. And he has caught a swarm in that for 3 years in a row now. 3 years. It's on the ground. The entrance is on the ground. And so it doesn't need to be 20 feet in the air. If you can get it up a little bit, great, but don't kill yourself putting them up like that. All right, this is, we get this question all the time. People say, well, when is it a queen cup and when is it a queen cell, right? So once it's charged, and what do I mean by charged? What I mean, it has royal jelly in it, so that then this becomes, a queen cell. This is considered a queen cell, okay, because it's charged, ready to go. These obviously are queen cells. But, especially new beekeepers, they see the cups, and they worry right away that they're raising new queens. And you have to explain to them that, no, they always have some cups hanging around in case they need them. Right? So just the fact that you have cups, it's not an issue. That's normal. That's typical. Yeah, we're not going to go into the Day-Marie method, but it's separating the queen from the brood to try to control swarming. Swarm triggers, this is important. So why do hives swarm? Congestion in the brood area, okay? No more space for the queen to lay. That's one. Lack of queen pheromones. So what happens is the colony gets so big, they all pass the queen's pheromone around, and that lets everybody know that the hive is queen right and everything is good and everybody's happy. But when the hive gets too big, if it's just too big, they can't get enough queen pheromone, and they go, that queen's kind of weak, and that can be a trigger for swarming. Good weather after bad, we see this a lot, right? Yeah. You have some rainy weather, and then you get that nice, beautiful day, and the phone starts ringing off the hook. Okay? Poor ventilation, I never really thought about that. Heredity. Swarming is a genetic trait. There's some people that won't collect swarms. Michael Palmer is one. He doesn't collect swarms because he thinks, you're going to just select for swarming. So there is a genetic component to it. And age imbalance in the worker bee population. This is another good one. So what happens is the queen gets blamed for everything, okay? So how many people have started with packages at some point, had packages, right? How'd you make out? Did they supersede your queen or your queen last? What happens a lot of times, and I won't say all the time, but in a lot of cases, better than 50% of the time, they supersede the queen because you're putting all of these bees that don't know each other into a box with a queen that they don't know, right? And why do they supersede her? It's not because she's not laying, because she comes out and she starts laying. They sense an imbalance in the population. And who do they blame? They blame the queen, and they want to supersede the queen. So what I've again, been told is if you're going to put a package in with a queen that isn't, from those bees, put a frame of brood in there with them. Open, a mixed brood to try to even out the population, and maybe you get better success with them not superseding your queen.
Bob, did you say mixed frame?
Yeah, a mixed frame. Yep, just
Part of that thinking is that this queen's been in this package. She's capable of laying.
Yep.
But she's not able to lay. You've got this 3 pounds of bees around her, and they're like, why isn't this queen laying? And now they already go in thinking there's something wrong with this queen.
Yeah.
By putting that frame of brood in, now they're happy that, yeah, this queen's doing her job.
Yep.
If you don't have that frame of brood in there, that's part of the reason they might supersede her. That's kind of out of Dave Tarpey's lab at North Carolina.
okay.
And so if you got a package and you're able to get a frame of brood somehow,
Yep.
from your other colony or from a friend, a frame of brood will significantly reduce the supersedure event from a package. The other point on packages and nukes too is that, and this was a researcher, I want to say she's in Pennsylvania, but I want to say USDA, but her point was that the queens you get in packages and nukes too should be considered starter queens to get that colony going. We've got them through the summer, and then requeen that in the fall with a young, vigorous queen. Keep going, because that queen it might make it all the way through the summer, but not really make it through the winter.
John sells queens.
Good point.
John, who did the report?
Good.
The
Good.
one that it should be a starter queen?
Good point. Right.
Yeah.
That last slide, just the age imbalance of worker bee population.
Yes.
Just something that maybe we can think about a little bit is that swarms are composed of more young bees. Okay, so it's a predominance of younger bees taking off with the queen. So in a swarming event, right, or pre-swarming, that queen is laying huge amounts of brood. And all of those workers newly emerged, right? A lot of that population is leaving with the queen. So many swarm control techniques involve separating the queen from the younger bees.
Okay.
Okay? Keeping her with foragers.
Yep.
For swarm
Swarm prevention. Yep. Good.
Yeah, that is a factor there. When you get a large population of very young bees in the hive, they're more likely to swarm.
Okay. Great point.
I like watching.
This is what I was talking about before. This is beekeeping in a nutshell, right? You want to have the biggest number of bees during the main nectar flow. This is what happens if your hive swarms and you get out of balance, okay? So that's pretty Now we're going to get into a lot of these slides come from Bee Informed Partnership, right? A great resource. We'll go through them pretty quickly. And you can see that during the most of the season, your bees are outbreeding the mites. And then you get into the fall, and all of a sudden now the bees start slowing down, and the mites are still going strong. So you get more. So these are the thresholds. We all know what they are. These are the two. If you haven't been to the Honeybee Health Coalition site, it's definitely worth a look. This one takes you right through. Just ask you questions. Is this happening? Yes. Then do this. Then do that. And really great resources to have. Managing the nectar flow. The only thing that we're showing here is how to expand the brood nest. This is one way, okay, and how to, this is called pyramiding up. You basically bring them up. So there's a number of ways to get them going. I want to get moving on it. Honey supers, always better to over super in the spring, right? Better to have more than not enough. And if you have some drawn comb and you have other comb that you want it to be drawn out, you can checkerboard it like this to help. Queen excluder or honey excluder? This was the great debate. When I took the course with Tim and Bob Hughes, that was the whole debate. Is it do you use them or don't you? So Bob always thought that they were honey excluders.
I agree.
And, you know, a lot of people use them. I don't use them, but if you want to keep the queen out of your supers, it works. You know, there's all these different reasons, right? You can get those little virgin queens that can get through there. Sometimes your drones get trapped in there. Sometimes they build burr comb or propolize them all and just make a mess. All right, Summer, this is where I want to talk to Landy. So this is where there's no right way, okay? Because here, you know, when we say feed during the dearth, right? Everybody, most people that you talk to will tell you if you do open feeding, you're going to have robbing in your hives and it's going to be a mess. Don't open feed. That's the worst thing you can do, right? Well, what does Landy do?
The exact opposite.
Exactly the opposite of what Landy does. Landy does her open feeding. She puts it far away. The bees see it as a nectar source. They go out and they suck down as much as they can, as fast as they can, and she builds up her stores for the winter. The other thing about this slide is this is a robber screen. Everybody know what they are? Okay. Some people will tell you, you know, robber screens are great. You put them on. Actually, to be honest, I have robber screens on all my hives, and they seem to work pretty well. Ask Landy about robber screens.
I've had problems with robber
She's had
screens.
problems with them.
Yeah.
So that's why I say try different things, because what works for you, it might not work for someone else. So don't be afraid to try something different. All right? And just, this is the other thing. In beekeeping, a lot of times you hear things that people will tell you. Like, you know, they used to say all the time, varroa mites feed on the hemolymph. And we all repeated that. I repeated that for years, because that's what I was told, right? Varroa mites feed on the hemolymph. Until Sam Ramsey said, nobody's ever really shown that. I wonder if they really do. And then he did it, and he proved that, you know, they feed on the fat bodies. So don't be afraid to challenge some of these things that you hear, like this open feeding thing, right? Don't be afraid to challenge it.
Sorry, the queen can't fit, the virgin queen can't fit the queen excluder because of her thorax.
Ah,
It's not the size of the epic. We were just on the epical today, and Robin Underwood actually made that mistake, and she said to Kate that she said the virgin queens can get through the queen excluder, and Kate reprimanded her very quickly about it and said, no, it's the size of the thorax. So I won't forget that.
I have heard that too, so I forgot about that. So again, right, difference of opinion. But I can swear I've had virgin queens go through queen excluders.
Then they're garbage.
And they're garbage queen, and maybe they were, right? That's a good point. Okay, and we talked about treating for varroa mites. So the point is, think about the season ahead, right? I have one last picture that I have to show. That's
So cute.
the cutest little baby in the world, my first granddaughter. All right, where's Justin?
Adorable.
Where's Justin? I had to put her in there. Where's Justin? I want to do the one on the, find the slide that has the latest pest. Does anybody know what this pest is that we're talking about? I know a couple of you people in the front do.
Oh, the new pest, yes.
Yeah, and let me tell you how this came about first before we go into it. Jean Miller went up and she gave a talk to the Essex County beekeepers in Massachusetts. And they started talking about this, and she brought this home, and that's why I'm showing it here. But this is a new pest that's been a problem in Canada for a long time. It's actually in Pennsylvania, okay? It's called a pygmy shrew. You see how small it is? And what it does is it goes into your hives in the winter, and it picks off bees from the outside of the cluster. And you can't see it real well, but it bites their heads off, then sticks that snout in and sucks out all the inside, okay? And these things are so small, their metabolism is so high, they have to eat like every 15 minutes. And there's one study that said a guy had 100 hives, he lost 100 hives out of 700.
70 out of 100. There's a typo there.
Yeah, there is a typo.
You can't lose 700 out of 100.
So for but that's in Canada. But they are in Pennsylvania, so it's just a matter of time until they get him.
Through a half-inch hardware.
That's what we have down here, right? are small enough to get through, right, or so maybe we have to go to 3/8. And the other thing, the other way you can tell is their poop. Okay, it's not like nice little turds like a mouse. Okay, for what can I say? We've all seen mice in our hives or in our, and so just to be aware of it in case you see this, because a lot of people would see this and right away they would think it's a skunk or something else, right? But it's this little pygmy shrew, tiny little, they're vicious.
Decapitates.
Yeah, it decapitates the bees and then sticks its snout in and sucks out everything out of the abdomen and the thorax.
So
That's
they're
where the
probably
protein
not in New England.
I'm sorry, one
Go ahead.
okay, comment, question? This guy, say it. Come on. Nope, okay.
My question is just, so they're known in Pennsylvania, Canada, and New England, and so like, what are they doing to control for them if they're?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I just became aware of these this week. It was all new to me.
So that's what I was telling Andy. Being from Partnership wrote a blog or article on it probably like 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So, but we didn't have them in Maryland, but that's the person that wrote it was out of Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
And
just
they
curious.
have, they,
We did not have them in Maryland, but they wrote an article about them because it was a unique thing.
Yep. So again, just to think about it, it's a winter pest, right? It's a winter pest because it's picking off these bees from the outside, the ones that are kind of cold and they're not moving around that much. They're easy pickings.
And is this like a native species or is this invasive? Like, is it?
What does it say? It says it's called the American pygmy shrew. So
So it's native and it's expanding its range.
yeah, mm-hmm.
there's some 3/8 inch hardware cloth nose guards.
Yep. Eastern Canada, parts of New England. Again, just to be aware of and maybe do a little research and keep your eyes out for this.
Yeah.
Do they chew on wax at all? There's other.
Don't know enough to tell you. I have a big problem with mice in the winter. I don't know about anybody else, but mice, they chew up my insulation and it's always a mess.
Look, that second
That-
link
that
is
blue
the
bit
article.
From being formed.
Oh, there it is. Yep.
2014, so 9 years ago.
Yep.
My friend Rachel did it, that's why I know that.
Okay, look at you. All right, well, that's why we wanted everybody to contribute. So that's it. That's it for me. Anybody have questions, comments? Question in the back.
Yeah, I have a question about mites.
Okay.
We have the mother mite lay the first son mite, who then fertilizes the females. What happens to that mother? Does she continue on to the next cell? After she comes out of that cell, she laid her first son egg in? What's her life cycle?
I can't.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes,
But
definitely.
go ahead, John.
I mean, let's say you have the first female mite coming out of a cell. She's been fertilized by her brother in that cell.
Yeah.
And she comes out, she'll be going to be for a little bit. The thinking is that mite needs to feed on the hemolymph of the bee a little bit. Next opportunity she gets, she'll go into a cell that's still open. She'll bury herself in the larval food underneath. She'll start laying eggs. She'll emerge 12 days later then as that cell opens up. And with that one female will come out 2 more fertilized females in ideal situation. So they're increasing like 1 to 3 to.
But the
and
first mother,
The first mother, she'll
what
go.
happens? How long does she go?
So now you've got the 2 daughters that are going to be ready for a little while until they're ready to get in the cell again. But the mother will go right back into another cell in a day or 2.
And how long does that mother might keep going?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't,
I'm thinking 3-4 cycles like that. And let me talk about that reproduction cycle can get interrupted by the bees. If you open up a comb and you see frames that have bold brood on it, the bees have uncapped that brood because that pupa has sent out a signal, pheromone, saying, hey, I'm under stress here. The bees will open that up, and whenever the bees open that up, the mother mite will run out. And whenever she runs out like that, that interrupts her reproduction cycle, so then she stops. She might not even go into another cell, so that's kind of a complete answer to that.
And that's why you'll also see some bees that will uncap and recap the same way. It's not I've seen it.
So before you.
Most
ask
often
about-
you see that
you're
bald
talking
brood.
about Marl-specific with the
Yeah.
different types of mite resistant.
Yeah.
Is VHS suppressed mites in that study too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I wanted to share that I took bees to a science fair, and I didn't take an entire hive inside my demonstration hive.
Mm-hmm.
And I made sure not to bring the queen. But I had a frame of open brood, and so that people could see, the kids could see the different layer stages of the larva. And I saw a bee carrying an egg, so I said, she's making a queen, right? So they realized that they didn't have a queen, so she's moving an egg someplace to start making.
That's another great debate in beekeeping.
Yes.
Do bees move eggs or not?
And yes, they do.
You,
Yeah, she was carrying an egg. I said, oh, but I've never seen that before.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
I believe they remove an egg from a cell because it may,
Yes.
something may be wrong with it.
Yep.
But
They
I
cannibalize.
cannot understand, and cannibalizer, right?
Yeah.
But,
Yes.
you know, that egg is glued to the bottom of that cell. You know, humans or bees cannot re-glue an egg to the bottom of a cell, whether it's a worker egg or a queen cell. But as far as I know. Now, people swear that they've seen eggs above a queen excluded.
Yeah.
When they get up there.
Yeah.
Well, there's one good possibility. There's workers who are always laying eggs,
Mhm.
and if the bees aren't policing them, then you'll see eggs. And
Yeah.
they might put them in a queen cell.
And that's a great point. There's always laying workers in your hive, some amount of them. It's just, not a lot. And so the bees know that and they take those out. So it could be a laying worker.
Yeah, so while it's maybe
No.
possible for
No.
bees to move eggs,
No,
the
no.
probabilities are something else going on.
So
Okay.
your very first slide, Bob, you say that the beekeeping year starts in fall.
Yes.
I would say, for me anyway, that it really starts much earlier than that. Summer at the latest. Only because it's summer when I need to make sure that I have a good, healthy generation of bees that's going to feed my wintering generation.
Jason.
If I don't have healthy bees in summer, parasite-free, varroa-free, and well-fed, I'm not going to be able to raise a good generation of wintering bees. So really prepping for winter starts much earlier in the year.
Yep. And if you talk to the bees, they'll tell you they start prepping for winter
In
in the solstice, right? That's really when they start. To them, winter prep is, June 21st.
Yeah.
But yeah, great point. Like I said, I just put it up there to get a little talk.
So in March, okay, a weak hive and a strong hive. Your definition of a weak hive, in, say the third week or the second week in March, when you open up the hive and do your first inspections, how many frames of bees? Is it 5 frames? Is it 6 frames? Is it 1 frame?
Well, you just heard John. John's been in his hives.
So I actually have an Excel sheet that I made for myself.
Does that surprise anybody? Huh?
Yeah, your engineer is
so
showing, John.
So it's, and it really is on the premise that I want 60,000 bees in that colony at the peak of the nectar flow to Ball's Point, right?
Right.
So if you back calculate from there how much brood you have and then how many frames of bees that would be. So that's really what I go by and including for swarm management. So to answer your question, right now, today, middle of February here, colonies should have, let me say, at least 3 frames, more like 4, 5, 6 frames of bees. Some have 8, a good healthy colony. A month from now, and they're starting to raise brood, a frame of brood now will turn into 2 or 3 bees in a month from now. So, mid-March, I wish I had my spreadsheet with me, that I'd be looking for closer to 8, 9 frames of bees. And, that's just one box of bees, basically. And there's gonna be probably 3, 4 frames of brood in there at the same time. Now, some colonies are gonna be less, some colonies are gonna be more, so you wanna take from the rich and give to the poor. The other thing with moving frames of bees and brood, that adds diversity to that colony. So you've got genetics from this brood over here, from this queen, and now you're moving some of that genetics into another colony. These genetics over here may be lacking in this other colony. So just moving genetics, if I can put it that way, is helpful.
Great point.
So you're saying basically the third week in March, like a full box of bees, right?
Oh, yeah, except 8 to 10 frames, I would say. I think I published an article about this last year, but I'll have to refresh. You might be able to find it sometime. Send me an email and I'll send you the sheet that I use. And I've been using it for a couple of years, so I feel it's pretty well refined.
In the board file?
Ivy's looking at the records. Because we record things with bees and brood. And what did you have?
So in last February, one of my strongest hives, I had 9 frames of bees, and in March I had 14 frames of bees, plus 4 frames of brood, 2 frames of honey. And then, okay, so this is the board hive, yeah, so it jumped up to 30 frames of bees, and 414, we had to equalize. So I have it all written down, and we have to take out, when there's too many bees, we take them out to do swarm management to equalize the hives so that they don't swarm on us. Yeah, so we have it all written down.
Thank God we have crazy beekeepers like this. 'Cause, no, seriously, somebody needs to do this stuff.
So this year I'm honestly scared because I'm pretty good at killing a few hives every winter, but this year I didn't succeed. So, and I opened one of the houses the other day to see whether they had any caproot because I was doing an oxalic acid. And then I do only mediums, but there were more than 2 mediums full of bees in there.
That's nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, but what am I gonna do with so many bees?
What was the temperature? What was the temperature? And that's looking at frames of bees this time of year, it's highly temperature
It was in the
dependent.
50s.
Yeah, so they're going to spread out more.
Yes.
If you went back and looked at it whenever it was like 50, that might be less frames of bees. So it's not an exact engineering science.
Right, well, to be fair, I think it was 47 degrees.
Yeah. Did you find any brood when you were looking?
No, I
Yeah.
didn't.
Okay, it's not unusual, but most colonies should have some brood now.
And I said before, I never go in my hives in the winter. When you're new, you should do anything you want to do to learn, right? So, if you want to go in,
So my rule of thumb is
Go ahead.
I'll open a hive if the bees are flying. If the bees are able to be out, it's okay for me to take off the top and open up the hive a little bit. If it's windy, the bees aren't going to be flying very much.
No, they're not
anyway, right,
much.
Even if temperature's up. But if it's a nice, calm, sunny day, and I pull a bunch, it was nice and calm, the sun was shining on the hive, so I was able to go through a hive. I was actually moving brood frames in because, and here's a little bit of a tip, that you know how the bees will build up drone comb in between the frames and everything? That gets to be a pain. If you put drone frames in there, the bees will tend to use the drone frames instead of building up that drone comb. Because whenever the bees are preparing for a swarm, to reproduce, they naturally want to have between 15 and 20% drones. And if you've got all nice worker comb and there's no place for the queen to lay drones, they'll make drone comb anywhere they can, in between, including in between the frames. If you put 1 or 2 green frames of drone comb in there, they'll use that a lot more than putting it in the frames, and that'll minimize your frustration with all those drones in between the frames.
I have a question. This is such curiosity. I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this. Robert John. So if you, when you have a space violation, you notice that the bees will grow comb perpendicular to the frame, right? So and we did an extraction of a hive that was inside a ceiling in some home, and then the frames were perpendicular to the end. So the bees would enter perpendicular to the frames. But in the Langstroth hive, they would be parallel to flying into the entrance, right? So does anybody know why? Because there was a beekeeper who had the entrance to the side.
Yeah.
So
That's
one's called
the
the hot
warm
way,
way.
one's warm way, one's called the cold way.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Landon.
Well, I mean, if you go down to the sustainable honeybee site, okay? Remember our friend Parks Talley? who
Yes.
has spoken to our club on
Yeah, he
occasion?
was doing that.
Yes, well, his original mentor and my friend, right, Billy Davis, who's Master Beekeeper Billy Davis, who's since passed on, developed the warm way, where the entrance is the opposite from the way we have our entrance. So it's on the side that is perpendicular to the plane of the frames. And Billy always thought that the bees would brood up better that way, and that it was better for them, that it was warmer. But is it? I don't know.
Well, he said it was easier to find the queen, right? That he knew that he was going to be on frame 3 or 4, right? So
Well, I can always
because
find
of the
queen
way,
hives, too.
because you're the queen whisperer.
It's just what you're used to, I think.
No, it surprised me, right, that we would go against the way they were.
There is something to it from the standpoint that we have large open entrances in the bottom. And you know what, during the summer, that's probably fine. But during the fall, winter, and spring, that's going to be a problem for the hive. They don't need all that ventilation. So if you've got frames like this, that air is going to come up through all the frames. If you've got frames like this, it's going to reduce it. But really the answer is to reduce that entrance in the times whenever in the fall, in the winter, and the spring. And we overventilate our hives, and I've significantly reduced the ventilation in my hives. And as a result, the honey consumption's going way down, and the bees are less stressed. There's less bees dying off in the winter because the bees need to use their flight muscles to generate that heat. If they don't need to generate that heat, they're not dying prematurely. And it's just a more natural way. I've got bees in the tree, right? If you look at how those bees want to live in that tree, they don't want all that ventilation. They just want that one entrance down in the bottom of their nest. And they're happy that way. If you let air flow through a hive, like a chimney, the bees can survive that, like Bob said, but they're going to be working harder to maintain that core temperature, and it's going to be harder for them to start raising brood. If there's less ventilation, they're going to retain more moisture in the hive. It's just like our house. If we've got it well ventilated, we've got cold, dry air coming in, it gets even drier in the house, everything gets super dry. If it's not constantly being purged out, now there's more moisture in the hive. A lot of hives that are over ventilated or dry, you'll see bees flying out on the cold days.
Looking for water.
Snow, and they die on the snow because they get cold and can't get back up.
Yeah.
They go on the snow because they're trying to pick up moisture to bring back to the hive. These are water bottle bees. What Tom Steele calls water bottle bees, or water reservoirs for the hive. There's bees that hang on the outside of the clusters in the hives, just holding water in their honey crop to supply the rest of the hive. And when they run out, now they want to go out and find water. Those are the bees you see on the mud puddles and everything else that bring you back. They'll do that if they have to, but if you're not drying out the hive, those bees will need to go out less to get that water.
But isn't too much moisture a problem as well?
No.
It's two essentially different philosophies for winter.
Well, I'm not going to use the word philosophy. Well, it's principles,
Two different methods.
Principles. And I've learned this, and I've tried it, and I feel strongly about it because I've learned that It really does work. Too much moisture. I've not seen too much moisture in any of the hives that I have. Now, if it's not insulated, you can get condensation, and that's too much moisture. But if you've got hives that are insulated, especially on the top, maybe the sides also, you're not going to have too much moisture. As a matter of fact, it's almost the opposite. Not enough moisture is the problem in the hive.
There you go.
So,
You know what? There's only one way to find out.
Yeah.
Try them both.
And exactly that. And
Try them both.
So try one hive, and I put clear covers on it because I wanted to see what was happening. So I could see what the moisture situation was in a hive when it was vented and unventilated with insulation and without insulation. So that's why I'm confident in what I'm saying, because I've seen it.
That's what I love about beekeeping. I do. Thanks.